Yo, you're watching the Awesemo Fantasy Football Channel. I'm Dave Loughran. Once again, along with Matt Gajewski. Follow that man at Matt_Gajewski, myself at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D over on the Twitters. And hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you like this fantasy football stuff as much as we do. All right, here we go. It's the must-see, biggest headlines around the league right now that you've got to be paying attention to before your draft. Now, this is not clickbait. These are legitimate injuries that are going to affect ADP, that are going to affect a lot. I wouldn't necessarily say they'd shake the foundation. This isn't Alvin Kamara done for the season, Christian McCaffrey out for the first 5 weeks. None of that. But still pretty important pieces of news that if you're going into a draft blind on this stuff, you're going to regret it. So, Matt, what's going on, man?
I think the biggest news that came out of the weekend was Travis Etienne. And we haven't had these devastating preseason injuries. I feel like there's one every single year. You know, we had Cam Akers before games ever started, but nothing in actual games as far as significant skill position players. But we just saw Etienne get hurt last night, the severity of which is not determined yet, but it looks like he could miss some time. He was in a walking boot. They described the injury as a Liz Frank injury, not supposed to be structural, but again, we really don't know yet, but that has a potential to be something long-term.
Yeah, Adam Schefter tweeted late last night that Jaguars rookie running back Travis Etienne suffered a mid-foot sprain Monday night at New Orleans. Per source, it is expected to sideline him indefinitely and require further testing. Now, when you hear mid-foot sprain, you're like, all right, not too bad. When you hear her sideline him indefinitely and require further testing, that's really not encouraging. Now, I don't know what that means. Maybe the further testing would reveal that he's going to be fine and that he's only going to be out for a short period of time. Or Matt, maybe it means that he misses a handful of weeks to start the season and then everyone just starts overdrafting the shit out of James Robinson.
I think that very much could be the case. We were expecting at least a two-way committee, if not a three-way committee with Carlos Hyde, even before the Etienne injury. And now I don't think James Robinson is a one-for-one replacement for Etienne. Etienne is that dynamic, first round back playing the sort of Paris Campbell, Curtis Samuel role in Urban Meyer's offense. James Robinson has never done that. He was a UDFA last year, and he's not somebody that regime is tied to. I think you may see someone like Dare Ogunbowale, who is presumably their fourth back, and they would probably keep him on the active roster if this injury is severe, but he's a pure pass catching threat. We've seen it with him at times in Tampa Bay. Or they may decide to use a player like Laviska Shenault, who did play some running back at Colorado, was used in a lot of creative ways in that sort of Travis Etienne role, or at least the role that Urban Meyer had envisioned for him.
Man, people were not happy with Carlos Hyde on Monday night at all. Bad pass protection, allowing a sack, just not playing well. But this is kind of something that you and I discussed, and this isn't necessarily to add insult to injury. And it was also just a preseason game, but Carlos Hyde was out there. James Robinson was out there. I don't necessarily know how much additional work Travis Etienne would have gotten, but I think it's reasonable to assume that hear me out. Okay. Again, not making light of an injury, so settle down. But I think some people that haven't drafted yet are going to get bailed out by this Travis Etienne injury because now they're not drafting him in the 5th round anymore, which seemed to me to be way too high anyway. Just saying.
I think it's a little high too, because we're not expecting him to handle the majority of the work. And I don't think we could have predicted that throughout the year. I think he probably would have been eased into more work, but he was really just looking at the passing down specialist role and then sharing the rest of whatever carries were left between Hyde and James Robinson. So I do think that does kind of bail fantasy owners out a little bit if they were taking Etienne high. But again, we'll have to see what happens here. Ultimately, anytime you miss a bunch of camp and preseason games, it's not good for rookies.
So where are you drafting James Robinson now? Where are you drafting Travis Etienne?
Etienne, we'll have to wait and see if this is, a multi-week injury. I think he kind of enters that Michael Thomas tier where he's going to be a real headache to have on your team. You're going to end up going through bye weeks, not knowing whether you want to cut him or not. And he's going to be somebody that takes up a roster spot no matter what. So unless he comes at a significant value, like double-digit rounds, I'm probably not going to touch Etienne. This is assuming he misses some time. If he's ready for week 1, continue to draft him. James Robinson, like I mentioned, I think is still probably going to be a little bit overvalued. Have seen him jump as high as the 4th and 5th round in early mocks. This is an adjustment period But again, I don't think James Robinson is going to go right into that Etienne pass catching role where Urban Meyer has liked to use more gadget style players like Curtis Samuel, like Paris Campbell. I do think that is going to be more Laviska Shenault, maybe Dare Ogunbowale. James Robinson just isn't really a fit for that role.
Jameis Winston and Marquez Callaway hooked up for some real flashy plays yesterday. And by the way, recording this on Tuesday, the 24th of August. So talking about that Monday night football game to cap off week 2 preseason. I got to tell you though, this is someone that you and I have been drafting a lot in best ball. We did many mock drafts where we grabbed Winston, I think like second to last or last pick of the draft. I just put a video out right here on the channel about late round sleepers that you need to be looking at. Marquez Callaway was one of them. Hopefully you grabbed him because now it's unfortunate, but now you're just going to see his ADP skyrocket. And there is always going to be a point where I just don't want any more of that. But when he was going in the 14th and 15th round, 16th round, yeah, all over that. Anyway, Matt, 5 for 104 and 2 touchdowns yesterday. Jameis Winston, 9 of 10, 123 yards and 2 touchdowns, no picks. Taysom Hill was okay coming in after him, but Jameis Winston looked very good. Callaway looked very good. I tweeted last night that Jameis Winston did just enough for Sean to guarantee Sean Payton will start Taysom Hill in week 1 because he loves that guy. Now, it was obviously somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I'm still not convinced. How convinced are you that Jameis Winston is the week 1 starter and that he's going to get the majority of snaps under center, even if he is?
If this were preseason week 3, I'd feel pretty good about it, but Winston still has another week to mess things up.
Yeah.
Winston's been a very good quarterback in his career. Outside of the turnover-worthy plays, which are unfortunately for Jameis Winston abundant, he's played some really good football and he's gotten his teams back in games where admittedly he caused a lot of the problems with turnovers. I remember he had that 30 interception year. I believe it was back in 2019 before he went over to New Orleans. But Winston, former number 1 pick, there's a lot of talent there to work with. And with Sean Payton now being his head coach, hopefully he can cut down some of those turnover-worthy plays. And I hope spark some production from this offense, even though they don't have Michael Thomas. But I think that's really what caused the Marquez Callaway ascendance. He's obviously benefiting from not having Michael Thomas. They're not using Traquan Smith right now, who did return to practice. There just isn't a wide receiver 1 in that offense. So they're looking for one to emerge. And like you said, when you could get Callaway in the 18th round of your best ball drafts, he was a great flyer because he could legitimately emerge as that number 1 receiver. He's a guy that came out of Tennessee a few years ago with no draft capital. So he would be a pretty big diamond in the rough if you found him there. But at this point, it looks like his ADP is starting to correct. And now if he's going inside, like the top 15 rounds, I think it's still a little risky.
Yeah, with Michael Thomas ultimately making a return as well. I don't think it's that crazy. Now, granted, Traquan Smith's been out for most of camp, and that's significant. He's still out, isn't he?
He returned to practice last week as a limited participant. So he was doing like individual drills and stuff. I assume he'll be
action yet.
Yeah, I think he'll be ready for week 1 if his practice reps continue to trend in the right direction. But even if he's healthy, Marquez Callaway should be on the field for almost all the snaps as the wide receiver 2 at the very least, if not the wide receiver 1.
I project him for the wide receiver 1 right now with Thomas. Now, Traquan Smith has had a couple big games when everyone else has been out before. But ultimately, across 3 years, he just hasn't been that good. But that was the good news from New Orleans. What about the fact, and this might seem unimportant, but it really isn't, just given that you're talking about guys like Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith and Lil Jordan Humphrey as your top receivers. What about the fact that Adam Trautman, who has been a popular late round tight end pick, at least he was until the preseason started, was carted off the field. And then Nick Vannett is dealing with an injury himself. How do we approach the tight end position, if at all, now in New Orleans?
This could be 2 severe injuries. Vannett's going in for an MRI on his knee. Never a good sign, but we'll hope that he's not significantly injured. And then the carting off for Trautman, not good either. But there's one really interesting player in Juwan Johnson, a former receiver. He came out of Penn State and Oregon. I believe he transferred his last year in college. But Juwan Johnson, he's a bigger bodied receiver, like 6'4". He was expected to take over some of that Jared Cook role, the pure receiving threat, the guy they split out wide as their big slot on occasion. And New Orleans does run a decent amount of 12 personnel. So there was a chance he played even with Trautman and Vannett on the field at times. Now with those two potentially out of the picture, you could be seeing a lot more snaps for Juwan Johnson. I'm not ready to call him a late round sleeper yet. I would like to see how New Orleans uses him in week 3, presuming those players are out. But he's certainly a name to keep your eye on just because of his receiving prowess.
As of now, would you draft him at all in, say, an 18 or 21 round best ball draft?
I would not yet. I think you can get other players, like Austin Hooper, the New England tight ends, players that are in timeshares but have solidified roles. I think that is a best case scenario for Juwan Johnson, and we don't know if he's going to have that role yet. So I'd like to see what happens in preseason week 3 with him.
If I asked you to set a line on Jameis Winston starting week 1, what would it be?
Probably
you'd favor him for,
minus 150, minus 145.
So he's a favorite, but a slight favorite. I mean, not really a huge favorite where you'd think he really should be given last night's performance and just the fact that Taysom Hill isn't really a quarterback. So, okay, minus.
Well, I mean, he looked great. It was also in the preseason, so he's not playing against. I mean, he did play against some starters for the Jaguars defense, but not all. And just look at what he's done in the past. They've started Taysom Hill over Jameis Winston in real games last year. So I don't think it's that far off.
I had a show yesterday with Ben Rasa and Eitan Shander, the fantasy football show, the live show here on the channel. Monday, Friday, by the way, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, or 2 o'clock, Eastern time. And they're saying, like, Lafayette, how could you think Taysom Hill will start or should start? And I'm saying, I think Jameis should start, but it's not about what I think. And it's exactly what you said. If you're looking at it and saying there's just no way he can start Taysom Hill over Jameis Winston, then why did he do it last year for 4 games and they went 3-1? If you're looking at it from that angle, it's still not out of the realm of possibility that Taysom Hill is your starter. I don't want him to be. I don't necessarily think he will be. I'd probably put the odds somewhere around where you have them, but it's not a crazy thought to assume that he could be the starter. That's all.
For sure. He has in the past. If Jameis Winston comes out and plays poorly in preseason week 3, I think we're right back to square one where it's a QB competition and a coin flip on who starts week 1.
Darrell Henderson. Whew. Every time I make one of these pre-recorded videos on the channel, my number one guy gets hurt moments to hours after I record it. Last week, I made one on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? I submit it, boom, he's hurt. This week, I submitted Darrell Henderson, number 1. There's a little teaser for you. Check that one out. It'll be released tonight or tomorrow. Tonight, actually, Tuesday, the 24th. Matt, and you know what happens? Boom, there he is with that injury. Every time. Michael Thomas was number 1. And then I found out that he just wasn't going to play. Cam Akers was number 1 on a list. It's crazy, man. But fortunately, it appears as though Darrell Henderson has escaped this one relatively unscathed. Now, in the sense that he is not going to be playing or practicing for a little bit, that probably is the case. He's currently day-to-day. But I was definitely more worried about it until I saw Rappaport report that Darrell Henderson did not suffer a major injury, just a slight sprain. So if that's the case, I'm not moving my ranking on him at all.
No, I don't think you should. It's probably more caution than anything. They know what they have in Henderson. There's no need to rush him out for preseason week 3, anything like that. And they do need him this year. We're talking about a former day 2 pick, and they don't have anybody of consequence on the roster behind him. I will say this injury scare should wisen you up to some of the LA running backs behind him, though. Jake Funk, who is a very explosive player at Maryland, only saw the field his senior year because of just devastating injury after devastating injury. This guy had multiple ACL tears in college, but still an explosive big back with pass catching ability. He's not Darrell Henderson. He's not Cam Akers, but if he saw some time on the field, I think he would immediately at least be an RB2. Xavier Jones was an undrafted free agent coming out of SMU. He's been with the team for now. This is his 2nd year, but I think it is notable that they kept him around. So he has experience with the offense. He played a ton of snaps in their week 2 preseason game. So I don't know who the primary backup is. I think it is still a little bit of an evaluation in LA, but those are 2 names that should be on your radar. If Darrell Henderson misses time for this injury or any other injury he sustains in the future, this is an explosive offense with Stafford at the helm, the receivers they have in Woods and Kupp. You want the primary back, so make sure you know these names.
Absolutely. And let me just add to that. Those guys could be quality fill-ins, in Darrell Henderson's stead in the event that he goes down. And he has dealt with some nagging injuries. But you've got to feel good about Darrell Henderson too. Just looking at who's behind him. I mean, sure, Jake Funk could be solid, but Xavier Jones, who else? Otis Anderson, I think, is on the depth chart right now. Like,
he's 170 pounds.
Yeah, right.
He's only on the depth chart for special teams.
Sure. Listed as a running back, but he's not going to get that work. Darrell Henderson, assuming he stays healthy, you have to be going into this thinking that he could get a ton of work this year.
I think he will get a decent amount of work, more than people are projecting. And even if, say, it's in the 60 to 70% range, I think he's the primary pass catcher. I think he'll see the money touches, stuff around the goal line, the important ones you want, and he'll only be spelled in change of pace situations.
Right. And if that's the case, I love that. Being drafted right inside the top 20 at his position, ADP of 43. Give me that all day. But we're on the same page here. Keep an eye. I think you're right, though. It's just wising people up to, on those last picks of your drafts, look at a Jake Funk. Look at even a Xavier Jones, whoever it's going to be. Do you like Funk over Jones?
I do, just explosive ability, good pass catcher, but I think they're very close.
All right, here we go. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You know I'm very high on him this year. And boy, there are a few players that I take as much heat for as Clyde Edwards-Helaire whenever I talk about them, tweet about them, make videos about them. And it's really perplexing to me because Andy Reid's history of running backs is insane in terms of RB finishes. They play on arguably the best offense in the league that's going to see some of the most red zone trips in the league. Sure, they'll have some deep balls that'll, cut drives short in terms of just ripping 160 yards downfield. And they just completely retooled their offensive line. So yes, forgive me if I really like Clyde Edwards-Helaire this year, who has now slipped into the third round in many drafts after coming up to the first round last year as a rookie. How much stock are you putting into this ankle injury, which appears to have him set to play in week 1?
Yeah, luckily the reports were positive coming out of Kansas City, not the dreaded high ankle sprain, which is good for Edwards-Helaire. I think at the very worst, he starts the year a little slower. They ease him in as a timeshare, but we saw them give him feature back touches before the Le'Veon Bell signing and at portions last year when Le'Veon Bell disappointed prior to getting hurt down the stretch. Now, he's a running back that has pretty good size. He's shorter, but he's a stockier back, so he can hold up. And like you mentioned, the offensive line is completely redone. As we saw in the Super Bowl, that was their biggest struggle. Now they brought in a slew of free agents, trades, everything to revamp this unit. So they should improve, which should help his goal line efficiency. Not to mention, he's an amazing pass catching back. Caught over 40 balls in his final season at LSU. With more snaps in the offense, you should also see his receptions rise this year.
I'm with you. Maybe, could he be worked in a little bit slower? Sure. But assuming he's back to full strength, I don't see any reason Andy Reid's not going to use him. Andy Reid loves the second-year backs. He's never been eager to rush them into it. And we saw that last year. He did early on, but then brought Le'Veon Bell in and kind of took some of that weight off Clyde Edwards-Helaire's shoulders. I don't see that being the case today here, and I'm okay with it. I'll tell you what, you look over at Underdog, and if you look at the updated ADP, by the way, if you haven't played Underdog yet, it's phenomenal. It is the best place to do best ball drafts. Matt and I do them all the time. Check our Twitters too. We'll be throwing links out there for you guys to draft with us if you want to dive into some of these, whether it's $5, $10, $25, $50, whatever it is, whatever you want to do. Hop in and use the promo code Awesemo when you do, AWESEMO. Get $25 when you sign up and deposit. And check out a site that right now has over $1 million to first place for the Best Ball Mania contest. And if you're looking at lower stakes, but you still want to sweat a big cash prize, $100K up top in the Puppy 3, which is $5 to enter. And then you've got some higher stakes stuff. But whatever you want to do over there, it's awesome. Use the promo code Awesemo. And if you haven't played Best Ball yet, watch the draft that Matt and I have done because it is different. You're looking to stack. You don't make waiver wire moves. You don't make trades. You draft your team, and that is what it is. There's more rounds and all of that plays into it, but the strategy plays out a whole lot different. So check that out first and then go into this and win some money. But anyway, Matt, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has now slipped to 24, which means that if you're getting him, you're going to be getting Edwards-Helaire in the third round of many drafts that you do. For me personally, that's just a little bit too good a value for me.
Right. I've been taking him every time I can get him in the third round in these leagues.
Yep.
He is, like you mentioned, they were drafting him in the first round last year. He has a chance to finish there. We're talking about a running back with first round draft capital handpicked by Andy Reid. That's not out of the realm of possibility.
The only first rounder he's ever running back he's ever drafted.
Yeah. 100% agree.
All right. Who else do we have on the list? Oh, let's close it out with this. Not as big of news, but Carson Wentz appears to be in some capacity back at practice, Matt. Kind of interesting for a guy that they gave a window estimation of 5 to 12 weeks. If he catches the low end of this window, what should we be doing with our adjusted rankings, or how should we be adjusting them?
I think we bring some of the Indianapolis skill players back up, primarily a guy like Michael Pittman, who is a candidate for a second-year breakout. I think he's somebody you could especially look to. And I want to focus on the pass catchers more so than the offense overall, just because of how difficult this schedule is. Without Wentz, I thought there was a decent chance this team was going to go 0-5 to start the year. We can talk about their opponents: Seattle, the Rams, Titans, Dolphins, and Ravens in the first 5 games. This certainly helps that, but I do think they're going to be losing in a lot of these games and throwing the ball. Wentz should help the passing game's efficiency, which should trickle down to players like Michael Pittman.
I like Pittman a lot. I think he's the type of player that could become an alpha receiver in this league. He has the size, the catch radius. He can be, contested catch, someone that can make good on contested catches or contested targets. And of course, in the red zone. What about guys like Campbell and T.Y. Hilton, just to expand on that a little bit? And then with Jonathan Taylor, we'll wrap it up right here with a 16 ADP now. Mind you, when we were drafting what were we doing? Probably in June.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor was being drafted 7th, 8th, or 9th in every single draft.
I think with guys like T.Y. Hilton, it's not really the offense that concerns me. It's more his age, the step back he took last year. They have emerging younger players in Michael Pittman, in Paris Campbell. Does that just continue to cut into his workload? And I think he's somebody that probably needs a high target share to get it done at this point in his career, which I'm just not expecting. Paris Campbell's the wild card in the offense. We only saw him for a brief period of time last year, but in that span, really high target share, explosive playmaking ability, kind of what we saw at Ohio State, where he's really good after the catch. He can turn those low A-dot targets into big plays. And now everything, I think, is just centered around the injury. If he's fully recovered from that, which all indications point to him being recovered, but he's just going to be an uncertain player, somebody that I'm certainly willing to take a stab on in the mid to late rounds of drafts. And then to speak on Jonathan Taylor, I was completely out on him early in this process, just because he's a guy that lacks any semblance of a pass game role due to the presence of Nyheim Hines. Like, he's just not going to play on third downs, which is a huge problem, especially with the Colts projected to play a very difficult schedule. We just talked about them maybe going 0-5. I think that doesn't give Taylor much of a ceiling, but now that his ADP is falling, I think he's a little bit more palatable. There's other backs in that range I would still rather get to, like your Ecklers. I would rather honestly wait and take a receiver in round 2 and take Edwards-Helaire in the 3rd if possible. So he's getting there, but I'm still not getting a ton of him.
I'm with you here. And I think he's better. Like, if you could get still, if the field hasn't corrected yet or adjusted yet for Carson Wentz likely looking like he's going to be there, and you can get Taylor in the middle 2nd round instead of the mid 1st, I still think that's a perfectly fine pick once you reach that. But there's also a lot of running backs in that area, and after him, as you mentioned, with guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that I like even more at their ADP. So that'll do it, Matt. Great stuff as always. Again, hit Matt up at Matt_Gajewski on the Twitters, myself at Laffy_D. Check out everything Matt's doing over at the Awesemo Odds channel and right here on the Fantasy Football channel. And more importantly, all of his preseason content on our main channel, Awesemo DFS. We'll catch you back here for the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.